Good afternoon, everyone. Following two fantastic presentations, one that included my own local Teamsters Local 174, brought back memories. Of course, my time wasn't during the COVID restriction protest, it was during the WTO protest. So those stories are fond. And Raul's detailed employment figures. I have some employment figures. They aren't nearly as detailed or telling quite the detailed story. But one thing that really struck me was I teach a large introductory course. So I had 300 students, and I had an HR manager coming in to talk to students about the difficulty of coming up with the working from home rules. And then, at one point I just asked the students, how many of you are really looking forward to having kind of the hybrid work freedom? Not a single student raised their hand. And I said, how many of you want to just go into work every day? Everyone raised their hand. So could be the COVID effects of high school Zoom learning could be transformative in the future. So the project I'm going to talk about is a construction union organizing project, and looking at the impacts of COVID weren't really the focus of this particular project, but since the time period that we're looking at includes the pandemic time period, we wanted to take a look to see what we can make of the impact of COVID. And first, just some contextual factors around union certification procedures in Ontario. Of course, Ontario has the primary Wagner model of certification procedures, the submitting the cards to the Ontario Labor Relations Board. And for most workers in Ontario, they are governed under the mandatory vote procedure. So you submit your cards, that triggers the election, and then typically within a 5-day period, although with some delays, it could be longer. Most private sector, provincially regulated industries are under the mandatory vote regime. Interestingly, the construction sector got card check procedures back. Some would say it's because of the distinct nature of construction projects, the kind of short-term employment arrangements, but others would argue that the building and construction trades made an alliance with the Liberal Party after in the post-Harris era, and so they were able to recoup the card check procedures that became dominant under the Ray government. So it is mostly card check. Density in Ontario is quite distinct, public sector versus private sector. Again, building on the previous comments. Didn't explore the little uptick in the public sector union density rates, but generally within the private sector, it maintains its long-term kind of decline over the last 10 years, albeit at a minimal rate of decline. And when we look at what I call the economic shock of COVID, we certainly see the sudden loss of employment. Now, this, of course, doesn't provide the detail from our previous presentation, but the point I wanted to raise here is that the service-producing sectors, hotel, food services, were certainly the most critically impacted. Goods a little bit less so, but when we looked at construction and we looked at non-residential building construction as well, it follows the business cycles, but it didn't follow a COVID cycle, at least not at this kind of large scale Ontario viewpoint from Stats Canada data. So the percent change was positive in terms of ongoing growth in the sector. This is looking a little bit more specifically. So that was GDP. This is looking at employment. And again, fairly broad hammer approach to looking at what the numbers are. But again, you can see the even before COVID, but you can see the dip from COVID for private sector employment. It evens out a little bit, but not sufficiently to say that there was a shock to employment in the construction trade. So 371,000 workers, 2019, just down slightly to 369 at the 2020 time point. When we looked at union certification activity, though, it became much more interesting. So these are the number of certifications by the Ontario Labour Relations Board in each fiscal year. And like I said, the construction sector is predominantly a card-based certification procedure. So 95% of those cases go through card certifications. Construction open period is essentially the opportunity when the trades get to rate each other. And so that's, again, a very small percentage of the certification activity. Everything that's not construction is put under the industrial title. And it's interesting to see that construction trades historically have had as many or more certifications than the entire rest of the economy, so to speak. So the industrial sector, that changed a little bit in 2018, 2019, but you can see the significant drop off from COVID, reducing non-construction certification activity by nearly 30%. Ironically, again, the construction certifications ticked up a little bit, not beyond where they perhaps were within this larger period, but it clearly indicated to us that, well, COVID hasn't really had an impact on their activity, at least on a numerical basis. And so we did explore some qualitative questions around what accounts for ongoing, robust certification activity by construction trades unions. A couple of qualifiers, though, on the certification activity in the building trades, and this isn't necessarily different from the industrial sector, but I think it is highly concentrated amongst small contractors in the building trade. So this graph shows the number of certifications by size of the bargaining unit. So bargaining units that have fewer than 9 employees is where most of the construction certification activity occurs. Very few, even up to the 40 to 99 range. So the vast majority of construction activity are with small contractors, small job sites, and those dynamics. When we look at certifications by union, there's been very consistent activity. Certain unions are really out there organizing a lot, other unions not so much. In part, it's a reflection of the market size, or one way of putting it, or the industrial footprint that each of their trades have. So the dark blue line at the top is LIUNA, which stands for the Laborers International Union. So it's not a compulsory trade, meaning they don't have certification tickets, but it is the most active organizing union in Ontario, driving a large proportion of the union certification efforts. UBCIA stands for the Carpenters Union, and so they are the second most active, and the IBEW, the electrical workers, are the third most active, and those 3 unions account for almost 2/3 of all certification campaigns in Ontario. And I'm going to come back to this, but it is, I think, an interesting trend that will continue to differentiate, where you have LIUNA and the carpenters tend to also be a non-mandatory trade, meaning you don't need an electrical ticket like you would for the electricians doing electrical safety work. Carpenters aren't certified in the same way in Ontario. So you have those 2 unions that are non-mandatory trades. The largest mandatory trade is the electricians, and all 3 of those organizations continue to have high rates of certification activity. If we extended this chart out for another year, they maintain that level well through COVID. Now, unfortunately, what was more disruptive to our research project than COVID were the large strikes that happened in the construction sector in the spring. Delayed our survey. So our survey, the quantitative data is still being collected, but I did a number of qualitative focus groups, and tried to get into the understanding the dynamics of, well, how did you organize during COVID? And frankly, it wasn't COVID that are, again, the factors that are really shaping construction organizing strategies and the experience of union organizers. It was disrupted at the start of the pandemic, where they had to kind of stop and figure out the health and safety protocols. But once that was put into place, it was pretty much business as usual for the trades that we talk to in our focus groups. And these included, we focused on what's known as the institutional, commercial, and industrial sectors. So these are the large projects, the office towers in downtown Toronto, the GM Oshawa plant, if they have a large project there, or institutions, building schools, building hospitals. So this is distinct from the residential and low rise. These are large projects with huge workforces and multiple trades. One of the surprising findings from the qualitative data was a few things that the organizers really focused on. One was the facility of using electronic cards now. They still rely on the kind of face-to-face engagement, but the ability to, have someone just click their phone and send in the card, it's become much more efficient in that regard. Again, they were adamant in emphasizing that the electronic nature didn't change the day-to-day work of organizing. They're still showing up on job sites. They may have changed some of their home visit type of strategies, but by and large, that person-to-person contact was still central to construction union organizing, in particular, showing up on the job site and just gaining access that way. In addition to the electronic cards as being kind of widespread and an efficient use was the electronic filing of applications to the OLRB. So no longer bringing your stack of physical cards down to downtown Toronto to turn them in, just being able to flip them in. Again, some of the efficiencies that they found that existed before COVID, but Zoom class existed before COVID, but none of us learned how to do it until we were forced to. The more interesting challenges beyond COVID are the ongoing trends in the industry that are really, I think, reshaping construction and forcing construction unions to rethink their organizing strategy. And perhaps the most important is the rise of what we call multi-trade contractors, or contractors who, and I'll talk about this in a minute, because of the changes happening in the industry, you don't necessarily need a plumber and pipe fitter separate from an electrician, separate from a laborer. The nature of the work allows you to have the same person, doing work across trades. Whether or not that's legal according to the electricity safety code or other building codes is a different matter. But operationally, the non-union contractors are really moving towards a multi-trade system, and the building and construction trades are scrambling to catch up in terms of coordination and multiple trades sharing organizing drives. It also, I think, gives an opening to CLAC, that stands for the Christian Labor Association of Canada. It is a certified union. None of the unions will call it a union, though. It's seen as the employer alternative to a real construction trade union. The industry trends that are really transforming it are new construction products like low voltage systems. You don't need a fully trained electrician who knows 220 amps to run lighting anymore, because it's all kind of energy over the Ethernet or low power cabling. And so jurisdictional disputes between the laborers and the electricians are on the rise. You have new construction tools, sorry for all the acronyms, BIMs and CADs. This is the rise of computer-aided design. You don't see measuring tapes on construction sites anymore. You see laser scopes where everything's laid out through pre-designed blueprints, and You set up the laser scope and it tells you exactly where every conduit and every outlet needs to go. So it's changing the skill sets and changing the nature of the work and the work process itself. Prefabrication has been around for a while. I think it's increased dramatically. And what that is, it's kind of the new approach to construction where you build something in a factory essentially, and it's almost like a Lego block that you come and install for what used to be kind of complex work on the job. Now you build those systems in a factory, and those get kind of plugged in on the construction site. So it raises the question of, is it industrial or construction?